Hey there, YouTubers, it's Pruitt and this is Jim Davis, and today on WebDM, we're going to be talking about them Rangers. Huh? All right, Jim, so we're going to go back into the woods.
Back into the woods.
Do a little tracking, try to figure out what's up with these Rangers.
Man, the Ranger is just all over the place in 5th edition. So there's the player's handbook version of the Ranger, which I think maybe a lot of tables are still using, whether or not it's, because they're part of some Adventurers League group that they're not using the Unearthed Arcana, or just a regular group that doesn't use the Unearthed Arcana options. I just want to be clear with our viewers, we are talking about the player's handbook options of the Rangers, although it's hard to talk about those without talking about the Unearthed Arcana options that are sort of exist alongside the player's handbook options.
It's a little like Star Trek, like Prime and Kelvin timelines.
Sure, yeah.
It's Spock's in both. He's the Ranger in both.
He's the Ranger. All I know is you can't multi-class from a Ranger into a Ranger.
Yeah, come on.
And so, I don't know. So looking at the player's handbook Ranger, I see a couple of things going on.
Okay.
Class description says they are a wilderness warrior. They sort of protect the frontiers of civilization from the dangers of the wilds.
Yeah.
And in a typical Dungeons and Dragons world, this means evil humanoids, because goblins and orcs and ogres and things don't really have a civilization. In the sense that humans and dwarves and elves do. We can go into a great deal, and maybe one day we will, about what that means and the implications of it, and whether or not that's good enough. That's a good way to interpret it. But the baseline is that there are hordes of teeming orcs and goblins in the woods, in the mountains, in the hills, and if you're not careful, they're going to sweep down and wipe that village off the map, or lay siege to that city, or whatever have you.
Yeah, you got to keep the fear in them.
You really do. So the Ranger exists beyond the borders of civilization, out in the wilds, facing those threats and fighting those threats proactively, as opposed to waiting for it to come to them. It depends on what kind of campaign I'm running and the kind of world that I'm trying to build, whether or not evil humanoids just live out in the middle of nowhere and wait for, and don't build anything or build up their own civilization.
Right. But assuming they did.
Assuming they did, that's what this Ranger is all about, protecting it from those kinds of things, or from other threats, dragons, giants, the threats that emanate from the wilderness and attack civilization. And so I see the archetypal Ranger as being Strider, in the inn, in the shadowy corner, with his pipe and his cloak.
Yeah.
The Ranger, to me, speaks to a part of Dungeons & Dragons where the wilderness and a journey through or into the wilderness is part of the adventure.
Yeah.
And I love that about Dungeons & Dragons, the epic journey, the quest that takes you from here to there, and the Ranger fits right into that slot and says, you know what, I can be your guide, I can be your tracker, I can be your hunter. That's the role that the Ranger has to fill. If you find yourself skipping past those parts of the adventure because they're boring or not fun, then you're doing the Ranger a disservice, because they are there that's their moment to shine.
Yeah, they're there to see you through the wilderness.
Right, it would be like if you had a bard in the party, but you never let them play for an audience.
Yeah.
Or get up on stage at a tavern and have a set. That's where the Ranger shines the most, is in the journey, and that's an exploration phase of the game, or pillar of the game. And then, of course, they're also a warrior type, so they're gonna, lay the hurt on people and do what they got to do when it comes to fighting.
Speaking of laying the hurt, let's go into some of their abilities here. Now, seeing as how we're just talking about the book, favorite enemy. It helps you find them.
It helps you find them. You're not getting the damage boost that the Unearthed Arcana option gets, or even previous editions of D&D. I mean, it's a nice, just sort of extra that you get.
Yeah, you're better at finding your favorite enemy, and that's good. And then you couple that with primeval awareness. and you're good at finding where they are.
Finding out where they are, and then presumably with survival, tracking them down. You imagine that the ranger perhaps spends a lot of their day just tracking different threats as they make their way through the wilderness.
Right.
And some more neutral aligned rangers might, oh, well, this threat's going to pass by the village, not any problem.
Yeah.
And so those are the abilities that allow them to do that.
Right.
To take the fight to the enemy, as it were.
But once they take the fight to the enemy, let's start with Hunter.
The Hunter is clearly the stronger of the two options.
Exactly.
I mean, Beastmaster does have some problems, and we'll get to. But the Hunter is a solid class.
Yeah.
And there's the abilities that it offers, whether they're going to be an upfront sort of melee ranger or the maybe more popular ranged ranger.
Mm-hmm.
The abilities that the Hunter gets are right up that alley and really let them do their job. And they're different enough from the fighter and different enough from the paladin that while there's some overlap in terms of, say, fighting style or the actions that you're going to take and the style of fighting that you have, the class abilities are what set it apart from either of those two classes and offer players a different take.
Yeah.
Yes, you could play an archer who is just a fighter and go that route. Or you can play a ranger and you get either Colossus Slayer in case you want to deal with those big threats, take them down quicker.
Right.
Horde Breaker. Allowing you to sort of like thin out the herd, as it were, and focus more on the minions of a fight or the little creatures that the boss man is bringing with them in a particular fight.
Right.
Even the defensive abilities of the ranger let them do that. Although I find that even though the rangers have a good hit die, the ability to wear some armor, that there may be of all the warrior classes, barbarian, fighter, paladin, ranger, that ranger is a bit of the more on the fragile side than maybe some of those others.
Yeah, I mean, I've always seen rangers as more of like secondary or skirmishers, but like the secondary fighter. They're good support.
Right.
They're good to come in and strike, do some damage.
Yeah.
But you want the paladin or the barbarian to be taking the hits.
Yeah, and I think that in the campaign that we saw with High Hawk, the elven hunter ranger, that's what we saw. We had a paladin and a barbarian in the party who were more of the frontline fighters to fight to the enemy, whereas High Hawk stayed back and used his longbow, superior range from the sharpshooter, and just the fact that it's a longbow to really take down threats before they even got to the party.
Yeah.
And so I found, at first I looked at the ranger and I said, I don't know, maybe they're not as up to the task as the other warrior classes are in the player's handbook, or maybe there's just something missing from them. But seeing the hunter in play made me go, you know what, it's perfectly fine. The hunter is does its job, does what it needs to do, and I think that's vindicated because the Unearthed Arcana option, which I suppose now is a good enough time. We will get to those options, viewers.
We will.
But it, vindicated by the fact that the Unearthed Arcana hunter is pretty much the same.
Unchanged.
Yeah.
Well, except for the 2-weapon thing, 2 attacks thing. Right. But again.
But for the most part, the abilities that they're getting that set them apart find them are the same.
Yeah. So, yeah. If it ain't broke.
Yeah. And so I like the hunter, and I think it has a strong theme to it, and I think that having a character who is is a hunter who lives in the wilderness, who understands their enemy, who uses specific techniques when fighting that enemy, that's what the hunter's going for, and that's what you're going to get when you take that option. The Beastmaster is another story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something that should work and should be so perfect.
Right. It just doesn't, and it's weird because I think that the Beastmaster has. I mean, obviously there's weird interactions with the action economy. They don't want to give characters or players too much. They don't want to be like, say, in 3rd edition where it's like, here's my animal companion. It gets 4 attacks as well as mine, and then just there's that particular player has an outsized influence in the game due to the action economy. So I understand that part. I understand not wanting to give access to a broader range of beasts because they want to keep things reined in. A class like the Beastmaster gets better the more monster manuals there are that include beasts that have different options for them, and it's difficult to determine where the break point's going to be on that. But the way it was presented in the player's handbook, I saw a class that was like just missing something. That the animal companion is not going to be as robust and is going to die more often than not.
Probably.
I don't know. The class just falls short of the mark. And even watching John's original Beastmaster, we got around that by telling him, you've got like 20 dogs. don't worry about one of them dying. You'll just bring in another
You
one.
bring in another one, you bond with it. It's your beast.
Yeah.
But
it falls flat. And for me, it also falls flat because it takes what I thought the ranger and the druid shared, which was an animal companion, and puts it solely in the ranger's camp and tells the druid, you don't get this anymore. And so there's a lot of, for me, D&D is about this buildup of lore and buildup of the intersection of setting lore and class mechanics that sort of combines to create this weird mixture of D&D.
Yeah.
And it can sometimes venture into being self-referential.
Yeah.
Say, Rangers based on Drist, which is based on the Ranger class, which is kind of...
Yeah.
So by taking the animal companion and putting it just in the Ranger camp, we're sort of taking something away from the Druid, which I didn't like. And still would like to see a Druid option that introduces an animal companion beyond what they could get with animal friendship. Although it does raise the interesting idea that you could have a Beastmaster Ranger with an animal companion spell, the animal companion spell that lets them get their animal companion, and then maybe magic initiate to get find familiar. And you could be that Beastmaster type that has just a ton of little critters around it, if that's what you're looking for.
That would be awesome.
And what I wish for the Beastmaster was when you think, oh man, that's going to be really awesome, that when you sit down to play that character, you're not disappointed because it just doesn't work the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. Which I mean, I think Josh expressed some of that after the first live play.
Right. Yeah.
So you've mentioned Aragorn. You've mentioned Drist.
Uh-huh.
What else is there in what else we got?
In Inspiration Land? Obviously the Night's Watch is sort of the archetype for the Ranger, right? They literally range beyond the wall, dealing with threats to civilization before it gets to them. And so in that respect, there's very much a D&D-ism that's embedded in Game of Thrones. I think it's probably on purpose. Or certainly, evokes a certain feel and a certain theme from the class. There's the Rangers that are in the different Lord of the Rings, the Dunedain, the Rangers that guard around between Mordor and Gondor. And I think those are good starting places for the Rangers. And it's one of the cases where I think, say, using something from the Forgotten Realms and saying like, okay, there's the Emerald Enclave here, which is sort of meant to balance the needs between the natural world and all of the monsters and magic and things that go on in the nature, the natural world in a D&D setting with civilization. And so using an organization like the Emerald Enclave in your home campaigns as being like a place where Rangers gather together, share information, assess threats, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there's not a lot of specific Rangers that I can think of that are good inspiration, which I find odd because when I think of adventurer, I think of Ranger. I think of someone who is not afraid to get their boots muddy.
Exactly.
Trek through the wilderness to go fight evil.
Yeah, you got a bow and you got a sword.
You got a bow and a sword, you're versatile. And so I think there's a lot of potential for the Ranger, even if the specific implementation as it was presented in the player's handbook wasn't as sharp as it was for other classes.
Right. The spells for the Ranger. You're probably going to cast Hunter's Mark.
Probably going to cast Hunter's Mark. Yeah, that's going to be your go-to at lower levels. And maybe even consistently through, up through higher levels. I think, as a go-to spell, if you're not using anything else with your concentration, it's not a bad option. But similar to the Warlock in that there's a time and a place for Hex.
Right.
There is a time and a place for Hunter's Mark. And sometimes it's not appropriate, or sometimes you don't need it. Particularly once you start getting, you're getting your extra attack. Yes, you could be getting more damage from the Hunter's Mark. But there are also maybe other spells that you want to cast or save those slots for. I guess to me, really the message that we're trying to get out to players is if you're new to the game, you're new to the Ranger, and maybe you're sitting down at a table and they're like, you should always be casting Hunter's Mark. Maybe. You don't always have to. Like many things that we do here on WebDM, it's about like taking the popular conception of how you should play this and basically saying like, you could, but it's not the only way you have to play this game.
Yeah, you can have fun in other ways.
You can have fun in other ways, and you can do other things with your spells. To me, for some reason, I've got no problem with the Paladin being a full-on spellcaster. They cast spells. although obviously not a ninth, up to ninth level spell slots.
Wow.
Whereas at the Ranger, there seems to be out there the popular idea that Rangers should have a spell-less option. That they should just know what to do without having to rely on magic. And I think that there's a place for that. I think that some of that can be covered in either fighter or rogue with the Outlander background and the survival skill. I think those make good spell-less Rangers, non-magical Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, take survival, nature, maybe even medicine.
Yeah.
Do a little of what Aragorn does when Frodo gets stabbed. He just goes and gets some stuff and
Do a little bit of that. But I think that Rangers have magic for a reason. That their spells are a part of them, and how spells work in a typical D&D world. Then you would have a Ranger that knows a little something. Right. And I think the fact that they cast spells differently than Paladins, just in terms of the fact that every day a Paladin wakes up, they can get different spell loadout and change it up that way, versus the handful of spells that a Ranger just knows. That it maybe is, there's maybe a way to conceive of Ranger spells as just being tricks or knacks that they have. Right. And it's just like, they're maybe not a full-on spellcaster, it's just like being out and being in the wilderness, being connected to nature has given them this edge. They can talk to animals. Yeah. They can befriend animals. They can, make, pass without trace is the sort of the gold star of Ranger spells in this respect. Give everyone else a huge bonus to stealth and, make it so that it's harder to track you. So I don't know. That's sort of how I see the divide between magical versus non-magical Ranger. I don't know. I sit down to play D&D, and I think there are a lot of assumptions that come with it. And one of those assumptions is that magic is ubiquitous and present in people's lives. Right. And so, of course, Rangers cast spells.
Well, yeah, but like you said, there's just a few tricks here and there. They know to mix these few berries and whatever, and you got some good berries. Yeah. And so, I think that, if you're one of those players who's looking for a non-magical Ranger, there's a variant option, which we probably will discuss. But also maybe consider just a different class and saying, that just because it doesn't say Ranger on my character sheet doesn't mean I can't play it like a Ranger, play this class like a Ranger, and just go approach it from that perspective. No? So you want something else? I think that was good. Okay, let's on to sorcerers then.
Yeah.
And the band marches on. I feel like a new man.
I'm just gonna keep rolling.
Okay.